Hey guys, welcome to Northwest Burst, where we'll have a burst full of topics talking about our spiritual lives. This week we're talking about discipleship, and let's introduce ourselves. So I'm Valine.
I'm Paul.
I'm David.
And I'm Gary.
Awesome. First question, how would you guys define discipleship?
Well, discipleship is just the process of an individual getting together with another, typically a younger believer, in terms of Christianity anyway, and enjoying that life-on-life type of relationship where experiences are shared, and the goal is to help that young believer mature in their walk with Jesus.
I like that because being able to experience each other's relationships, because once for all discipleship is building relationship with each other, being able to be transparent, being able to be real. Because I think it's better to not put up a wall, but also just being hey, relational. Hey, I want to be honest with you and what you're going through and what I'm going through. But I think some points it meant to be filtered, but in the same sense hey, you can trust me. I'm here to be a listener of some questions I can ask. Here, how can I pray with you? How can I help you? I think that's the most two component question to ask. How can I pray for you, and how can I help you in ways where I can help you grow in your walk with Christ?
Yeah, what I like about discipleship is, of course, we talk about our spiritual relationship with God and our devos, our prayer life, etc. We can also talk about the other aspects of your life, whether that's professionalism, relationships, and really dive into how our relationship with Christ is supposed to affect all these different aspects of our lives.
Yeah, both of you made really good points. I think first and foremost, that whole ability to trust and keeping confidences, I think, is very important in this type of relationship. But also, I think people need to understand that discipleship can sound intimidating, right? I think mentorship might be a better way to look at it, where, as David says, not just spiritual issues, but also life-on-life issues. What am I doing with my career? How do I grow as a father, a dad, a wife, husband, whatever?
Yeah.
So I think it goes beyond just the spiritual aspect of development.
Who are you becoming more like as a disciple?
Hopefully Jesus is the person that is discipling you, that's for sure.
Yeah, so I think a couple themes came up there, just becoming more like Christ on this lifelong journey, and sharpening one another, and then also the maturity aspect. So it's not necessarily an older person and a younger person, but a more mature person and a less mature person, or oftentimes a peer-to-peer. We're both working on helping each other mature.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think the biggest thing is I think it can be certain circumstances being the age thing, but even for me, I decided doing discipleship 2 years ago with a guy just moved from Arizona, and he just been real. Him and I have been able to grow this a strong relationship with each other. We've gone through I think 4 books already, and then about a year after our discipleship program started rolling into, started being a lot more frequent. He told me hey, I'm really interested in discipling someone else, and he actually mentioned to me about someone younger. I think it was really cool for him to opportunity, because he felt he was really mature in his faith and his walk with Jesus. For him to be able to come alongside this brother and hey, can I help you? Can I help you what it means to be a believer and be able to be a follower of Jesus? I think that's a really cool thing to see. I think sometimes age does matter, but sometimes it doesn't, because it comes down to maturity, what Valen was talking about.
That's an awesome segue. How have you experienced discipleship in your lives?
I've never had a one-on-one type of a discipleship with anyone, even as a new believer. But for me, the discipleship occurred actually when my wife and I started coming to Northwest. It was the couple who invited us here, and interestingly, they were younger than we are. They're 10 or 12 years younger than us. But we started off as a Bible study, and I know it was disappointing for them, because they had the idea of 6, 8, 10 people in a Bible study, and here is just my wife and I. But it turned out to be a discipleship because we could share that life on life, the personal challenges.
Yeah.
And the 2 years we spent meeting regularly, I think, really helped solidify the understanding that my wife and I have about who Jesus is. So
That's awesome.
Yeah, I didn't really think much about discipleships growing up. I feel like I never really heard too much about discipleships or the importance of it. It wasn't really until a friend recommended me to find a discipler like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And it's actually like kind of life changing. Like I feel like the amount of growth or maturity I've had recently all comes or mainly comes from like being discipled, because then you really have like this intentional relationship with someone where you're really trying to focus on just growing your faith, learning more about God, learning more about like how we're supposed to be living our lives, and it's just like that intentional aspect of it kind of just helps you mature faster, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a big thing about discipleship is like being able to grow together. And I think for me, it's like it's not just about like working on your spiritual life, but also that this actually transparently like comes into your work or your school, your classmates, wherever you are. I think it shapes you to become a better person to your characteristics, because I found like just even reading through some books that I've been going through on my discipline, and then it's been really challenging to answer these tough wrestling questions that we deal with, like some maybe be like baptism or salvation or even our integrity, most of all, because the integrity comes a long way. It's like it becomes a reflection of a son. And I think that's the thing to be reminded, like those asking those tough questions, so that we can continually like grow and also be challenged in our walk. Because sometimes if you don't get challenged, then how can we grow?
Yeah.
Can you compare and contrast maybe some mentoring or other types of relationships that you've had? Mentoring.
I've had a professional mentoring. I mean, most corporations will assign a mentor to a young employee, right? Or a new employee. So there have been many occasions where I've been mentored by an older employee or more senior employee, and I've been mentored younger employees. So again, like I said, the word discipleship sometimes might be intimidating for people to think about me discipling someone. But I think mentoring is a much broader word maybe for most people, and I think it's much easier for people to accept the idea and embrace the idea of being a mentor, because I can share some experience or some knowledge I have with somebody who's younger. And recently I've had an opportunity to mentor a friend of mine who became a believer a year ago after his wife died, and it's been really really amazing to see God working in his life. I think that was one of the biggest blessings for me, but at the same time, God's been working in my life. The challenge of being a mentor is you have to also know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it forced me to really spend more time studying God's word and praying and asking for guidance. So it's been a real blessing in two respects. One, seeing my friend grow, and secondly, for my personal growth. That's been really an encouragement.
Yeah, I haven't had any other mentor relationships, but I kind of do want one, like in a professional setting now, just from seeing how effective and impactful like having one in my spiritual life is.
Yeah. So David, I think you've talked a little bit about having a discipler and being the one being mentored. Have you had relationships where you're playing the mentor role?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of like a gray area between mentor role and discipler. In my mind, at least, there's a little difference where if I'm like discipling someone, I think of it more as kind of from like a spiritual aspect, and a mentor really being probably someone who's maybe a different further stage in life where they can speak on a lot of different other parts, like we mentioned earlier, whether it's about careers and moving up, or it's about relationships, etc. So I don't think I've mentored somebody specifically, but I have discipled a few people. And yeah, so that's been challenging. It makes you grow in a lot of different ways, because I've never really been one to like lead discussions or, I don't know, lead anything, I guess. I really like to be the quiet guy. But as you're discipling someone, you really have to take initiative, reach out, make sure they're doing okay, come up with different ideas and topics to think about, and if something's not working, like trying to create that kind of open communication to see what would be most effective. So yeah, you grow in so many different ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it just depends on like what works and what doesn't work. Because if this person's like happen to be like not big of a reader, like what can you do? So then like, oh, what are some things we can be talking about? Maybe like, hey, if you've not been reading a book, maybe an article, a short article, because it's not as bad as reading like a whole 30-page chapter.
Sure.
But I think even an article as simple as that, like, it really allows you to open discussions. Or, hey, like, can you watch a clip on the news? Like, what are your thoughts about those things? And then you as a mentor could probably pull up some scripture already, like Gary was talking about, like really prepping and like being intentional with like their like with your mentee. I think that really helps and goes a long way. Like being able to cater to an individual, like what it means to like how can we help them? Because like everyone has like a different learning ability. They either like they're a visual learner, they're just like hands-on or a listener. I think that's like comes the same concept of learning, being able to work with a mentee to be able to cater to those needs. Like what are your needs? How can you learn best so you can grow on your own, as well as like me walking alongside you.
So do you think that the mentor relationship has to be something that's formalized? Does there have to be a meeting of the mind saying, okay, let's get together for an X period of time and engage in this type of discussion? Or can it just occur naturally in the course of building a relationship with someone?
I think it depends, because honestly, if the person's personality is like, oh, I'm like really strict, like kind of like an engineer mind. Like no offense, but like I think that's like, because it's just like they like to be. Well, it's kind of stereotype, so I apologize. But that everyone likes I guess like part of the personality, like they like structure. So I think that's one type of personality. But if someone's more easygoing, it's like, hey, like David, like, let's like hang out and talk and then see what's going on in your life. I think that works too. It goes either way. Again, like it goes back to catering the person's personality and what works and what doesn't work for them.
Because in that regard, I think I've seen both of you guys actually engage in mentoring. The relationship you've established with the younger guys and coming alongside them to encourage them. I think that's all part of mentoring.
Yeah.
So don't ever feel like you've not done any kind of mentoring, because I think it occurs much more often than we actually think it does. Anytime you express an interest and a desire to just come alongside somebody to encourage them and help them get over a rough spot or rough patch in their lives, I think you're mentoring.